Hey guys, today we're going to be doing an in-depth review of the Valve Steam Deck. So I've been playing with this thing for the last few days, and I feel like I got enough experience with it to give you like an in-depth review on it and just my overall thoughts on like where I see this going, who this thing is for, and just my overall experience with it. So what exactly is the Steam Deck? Well, as you can see right here, it may look like, at first, a big, oversized Nintendo Switch. You would be right on that at first glance, but truth is, this thing is a lot more underneath the hood. So, as you can see, the design of it looks very similar to a Switch, but instead of like a traditional console, though, this thing underneath the hood, it is really nothing more than a PC. Meaning like it uses x86 based architecture, very similar to like PCs use, or like desktop computers, laptops use, and all that. And therefore, that alone, that gives this thing a lot of, possibilities of what you can do with it. But you can see it's, but instead of like, with a keyboard and mouse, they shaped it like as if it would look very similar to a Switch, of course, with all of its buttons, analog sticks, and whatnot. But how this came to be, though, is, believe like Valve just thought, with everything that we have done here, with what we learned with all of our previous hardware endeavors, including the ill-fated Steam machines, why don't we like learn everything we've learned from those previous products and combine it into something that potentially is very revolutionary for the PC gaming landscape, and therefore you got the Steam Deck. So a thing that PC gaming has always had an issue with is how do we make it accessible to like everybody, like no matter what type of person you are, no matter what your skill level is with tech, you can just buy something and you have access to the world of PC gaming. The Steam Deck, and there have been other products like this beforehand, of course, but the Steam Deck is the number one answer to that, and plus at a very, very affordable range here. So let's go and discuss, everything about it. So for the hardware, as you can see, it has, two analog sticks, very similar to the Switch, has a D-pad, face buttons, and as well as you can see underneath on both sides of the system is trackpads right here. Very similar to what's in the Steam controller, right there you can see. Basically, it's like similar to a trackpad in a laptop, basically, that you can use this to move like a cursor around, which we'll talk about that later on. And it's got like a L1 and R1 trigger or bumpers right here, as well as L2 and R2 triggers back here that are analog, unlike the Switch, where the triggers are just digital, so that therefore means it's just like a simple button press. These, they have distance until, depending on like how much you're pressing down or when it's like fully pressed down. That's like, to me, that is a big advantage over the Switch, something that Nintendo did not replicate since the GameCube. That was the only time that they ever did analog triggers was with the GameCube controller, but besides the point. But another thing right behind in the very back here, there is four sets of back buttons right here, and these allow you to program any other button to these back buttons right here on the deck. That allows a lot of customization. That say like you're playing Elden Ring, for example. You probably don't want to, take your right thumb off the right stick here, but you do want to press, say, like B to dodge or like start sprinting, Well, you can program one of these back buttons here to be the same thing as B or any other button, vice versa. Maybe the same thing for like D-pad, so that way you can switch between your inventory without having to let go of the left analog stick to move around, And that level of customization, like that is amazing that this comes with that no matter which model of this system you get. So good on Valve, for including that, and on top of like every other possible customizations you can do with this system here. Of course, this may not sound like anything new, of course, if you use like SCUF controllers for many, many years, but the fact that this is with the system by default, no matter which model you get, like I said, that is a big plus, and like serious kudos to Valve, including those back there. In terms of options of how you can buy this thing, you can only get this on Valve's Steam webpage. The way it works though is you have to put down a $5 reservation, and when it comes time that they will have a system in stock for you, regardless of which model you get, they will send you an email, and you have about like 72 hours to pay for the rest of the system, and they will ship the deck to you, no problem. It comes with 3 different options. One, a $400 option. It only comes with the deck itself, as well as a carrying case, and only 64 gigs of internal storage, which that alone is absolutely nothing whatsoever. The second option that you have is a 256 gigabyte model, which that comes with the carrying case as well, including some like Steam profile icons for like your avatar, your background, what have you. Honestly, it shouldn't be a thing to like really sell you on like this different version of the system at all, but I'll show you a screenshot of like what these icons have, because I have the next version of this system here. The final option for this is a 512 gigabyte model, and this one costs $650, and it does come with a few extra perks compared to the previous 2 ones. Probably the most notable thing is this has a better anti-glare screen, meaning it's more usable when you're using this outdoors to where you can see the screen better. Personally, I don't think it should be a deciding factor of this, because I don't see people using this thing often outside, if I'm honest, but that option is there though regardless. And it also comes with an exclusive keyboard theme that you would use in the UI of this. Honestly, it's whatever. Again, like with the other perks on the previous system, which you do get with this as well too. I don't think that should be a deciding factor of whether you should get to this version, in all honesty. And another thing, the carrying case for this, it has a exclusive thing on it where the emblem on the very top of it has like a unique engraving on it, because the other 2 cases, it's just like, if I recall, it's like painted on, and it's just like colored white and gray for the model. This one, it's actually like the regular Steam Deck logo that you see. So those are the difference between the 3 of them. And I will admit though, the 64 gigabyte model is the one to get for certain people, which I will talk about though. Believe me, I will totally explain that of the whole thing why. So that's the hardware, of course, but what's the number one thing that matters with this thing is games, of course. So what's this thing like playing games on it? So I will say with this, at the end of the day, it is a PC underneath the hood. The specs that this thing has is AMD's Zen 2 CPU architecture. That is the current line that AMD has. It's very similar to what's in like the PS5 and the series consoles, as well as the graphics card is AMD's RDNA 2 architecture for their current graphics cards. For example, that's what the PS5 and the series console use for their GPU architecture. That's what's in like AMD's newest, 6900 XT graphics card, 6800 XT, etc., etc. So that makes this system like very powerful to run like almost any game out there in the market right now. But, in terms of like performance, this thing, like every single game I've played on it, whether if it's a 2D based indie game or like brand new game, say like Elden Ring, for example, it performed flawlessly on this thing. Plus giving you all the options of what you would get for the PC version of some games. Tweaking settings, customizing controls for like your liking of how you'd want to play the game, as well as giving you some options within like the deck's own system settings to tweak it to have like the battery last for like a certain amount of time, as well as change like filter settings to make the game like look sharp, but still make it perform better and save on battery life too, which we'll try to explain more in that in a little bit here. In terms of controls for the deck, again, like all the options you have on the system for like inputs, you have like infinite amount of possibilities of the way to control this thing. Because, you know, you have like analog sticks, D-pad, face buttons, 2 trackpads here, which will function very similar to a mouse, the back buttons as well. And this thing, it has a gyro sensor in it as well. So say like for a first-person shooter, you can move the system angles in different ways to adjust how you aim with it. Similar to like how Nintendo does for their current control schemes, and that control scheme is starting to become like more and more popular among some games for like consoles and like into PC stuff. So that's good that developers are really pushing that type of control scheme, because it really does work out for a lot of people, thankfully. In terms of games that you can run on this thing, this is where it can become a bit of a problem, though, with the system. Because that this is a PC at the end of the day, that doesn't mean every single game you throw at this thing will be fully compatible with it. Because the operating system in the deck by default is a Linux-based operating system. It's a SteamOS 3.0, basically. And with that being a Linux system, that did mean that Valve would have this issue that not every game on PC is going to be compatible with this thing, because when it comes to PC gaming, like most people are using Windows-based computers to play their games on, because that's the majority of the world has for computers for their operating system is Windows, of course. So what did Valve have to do to like rectify that? Well, they use something what's called Proton. That's basically like a layer of, in layman's terms, like think of it as like a software that is on top of SteamOS that basically makes the games think that they are being run on a Windows-based operating system, therefore allowing way more compatibility than you would think for some games. Though there is still the issue where like certain games, say like some of the more popular esports games, they all use, you know, stuff like anti-cheat stuff and all that, and some of that software is not like is not yet compatible on the Steam Deck here with SteamOS and all that. Thankfully, Valve is really doing a good job, though, of like going to like many developers and these same people that do make like the anti-cheat software, though, to make sure like that they can get as many games as compatible with this thing as much as possible. So yeah, good on Valve. You know, they are really heavily supporting this thing. Like, it feels like every other like day they have like a new update, whether it be for like the OS on this thing or to make a game like Steam Deck verified, you know. For this system, though, while you're playing some games, though, it does have like an option within the system settings, whether if you press like the 3 dots button down there, which opens up an overlay on the side, and there it does have a menu for the battery settings in the system, but in there as well, you can change whether if you want to limit the game's frame rate to 30 FPS or 60 FPS. You would like change this if you would want to like save battery life on the system, because having the system stay at like a very consistent 60 FPS, that is more demanding on the hardware, of course, so that will make the battery like drain faster, possibly, of course, but other settings that you have access to, you can change like the wattage usage of this system. So you would want to turn this up if, say, like you're playing a more demanding 3D rendered game, for example. So that way the game will be like a lot more stable as you're running it, so that way it doesn't like stutter often, as an example. But if you're playing like a 2D based game, like an indie game, for example, you would like turn like the wattage on this down, and as a result, like the battery will last a lot longer doing that as well. It does have filtering options. One of the options is FSR. This is an AMD feature that they have on like their graphics cards, and basically what this allows the system to do is It lowers the resolution that the game is being rendered at, but it does apply like a sharpening filter to where like you almost don't notice that the game is running at a lower resolution. This will help with the frame rate to be more higher and be more consistent and all that. Think of this as very similar to like NVIDIA's DLSS that they have on their graphics cards, where its main use is very similar to that, of course. So really cool that they managed to get that on there, because it really helps with the performance of some games. So good on Valve for definitely putting that in there. Speaking of battery settings though, earlier, we should probably talk about that, given that this is a portable mobile system, of course, at the end of the day. So what's the battery life on this thing? That varies on like what you're using this system for. Valve has stated that this system would last between, say, like 2.5 hours to 8 hours. That is a big gap, of course, though, but at the end of the day, that solely relies on what games you're playing on this thing. If you're playing like a lower demanding indie game that's like 2D based, that will get you closer to that like 8-hour mark that Valve claims, of course. If you're playing something, say, like Elden Ring or even like Half-Life, for example, that'll be more taxing on this system, so as a result, the battery life won't last as long, though. But with how long that I've played with this system, I feel like the charge lasted very good for like all the settings that I ran it at. I've only played games at 60 FPS on this thing, and it has lasted very long for me. That it felt like every other game that I would play after like an hour or two, say like after like 2 or 3 games, so that's when I noticed like I would have to start charging this. And like knowing the specs inside this thing, like that is totally like respectable, because again, you have to understand like the power that Valve has put into this thing with AMD's latest architecture. Like the specs in this thing is pretty demanding for the amount of power that they require, of course. But regardless though, I think they did good with the battery that they put into this system for how long it'll last though. But of course, depending on your use case, that is going to dictate of how long it'll last, of course. But that's why, that they included that settings menu to where you can adjust certain settings to make the system last as long as you need it to, of course. So that's really good that they give you that freedom for how long that you would want this thing to last. So they give you plenty of settings to work with to adjust for how you would want it to work. So as I mentioned earlier, that this thing, it is a PC at the end of the day. And Valve, they stated that the big selling factor for this system is you can do whatever you want with it, because, it's a PC at the end of the day. And that does include, and they did announce this when this thing was revealed last year, you can install Windows on this thing if you want. You don't have to use SteamOS on this thing. You can put Windows on this if you want to. So what's that experience like? Unfortunately, at the time of this video's recording, it is still limited in a way, but Valve is working on it to make it more compatible, though. So let me explain why. So you can basically make a different partition on the drive in this thing to be solely meant for Windows. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's just you don't understand how you install OSs and all that. But if you're a power user like me though, then you'll understand this, of course. But so you do install Windows on this thing. It'll boot up no problem, and it performs pretty well though. In terms of boot speed and how the system interacts with it. It works pretty well though. Though the limiting factors with it is driver support though. They have released a few days ago, the time of this video's recording, drivers for, say, audio, certain inputs on this thing. So they are working on it to, make it more compatible with Windows. So, if you're very familiar with Windows, you want to use this, say, for work purposes, maybe editing software possibly, but you need Windows in order to do that, because the software you use for your work stuff is only compatible with Windows. Well, you can put it on here, and so far, what I've read of people using some software, it has a wide compatibility for that stuff. So Yeah, some, the Windows experience, it is a work in progress though, have certain expectations going into it, but support for it though has been, rolling out very well though, with driver support, and currently of what people are able to do with it is pretty nice too. But explain one other thing though that you could do with it later on that makes this thing like even bigger for gaming purposes though. But in case you don't want to put Windows on this thing, you just want to stick with SteamOS, which is totally fine to do that. SteamOS, it functions pretty good on this system overall. They did completely overhaul like a big picture mode in favor of this here with SteamOS 3.0, which is what they currently call it. But gotta say, it really does perform well. Though I will say a problem with it though, it can be confusing to know exactly where certain things are if it'll be like the first time using it for you, and if you didn't have like any tutorials on like where it is, like say like you give this to a friend, they may struggle a little bit with trying to figure out where certain things are, like say like where the search thing is. It's at like the very top of the screen here, and there's barely indication of where that is. And also to find certain settings within like system settings, it's kind of, it takes like a little bit extra steps to get to where you may want to be. But Valve, they will update this, over time. They'll make it more seamless over time though, because again, Valve really has been supporting this thing heavily with, updates and firmware updates, what have you. So this is something that will change in the future, of course. But in terms of saying like you're like in this is like your first ever into like PC gaming, I do think the UI as it is, whether if you're browsing through like the Steam store or just like your library on here, Valve has made it like a very seamless process to make it like very user friendly, to let you know like how you can find your games, sort them in certain ways. Same for the store page, like search for stuff and find them in certain ways. Also to let you know on like a game store page, to let you know if the game is compatible with the Steam Deck here, because they started like a new like trend to where that they will have they will let you know if a game is Steam Deck verified. That'll let you know like the game has full compatibility with the Steam Deck. And there's also like some custom profiles that they may have made, or well as like the community has made as well, to make it have a unique control scheme on the Steam Deck here. They will also let you know if like it'll work, but there may be some issues with it possibly, but that will possibly get fixed though, whether it be through like Valve or maybe the community, which the community for this thing is like amazing for how much like custom stuff people have come up with for all of these control schemes here. And there are some games like one that I've tested, Black Mesa. It just has like an icon to where it's just like unknown, and when I played it, the menu was like really difficult to use. Like the D-pad did not work properly to cycle through the menus nor even select stuff. I had to use like the touchpads as a mouse cursor to basically select things in the menu. But after that though, the game like controlled perfectly fine with like a normal control scheme for a first-person shooter with regular face buttons and analog sticks. But point being is, make sure like you check certain games before you like pay for them to see if whether you'd be comfortable if they're like Steam Deck verified and whatnot. But also you can do like research through like online to see if other people have played these games on the Steam Deck to see if they run well, or maybe check the community page to see if there's any like custom profiles for control schemes on this thing, because that might actually make the game run better on here. And speaking of the community pages here, like the entire Steam interface from like the desktop app on a PC, like all that is here. You have access to, as stated earlier, the Steam store, your library, the community page. And the community page, that's where you can see like guides for certain games people have uploaded on there, like artwork for some games. You can see reviews for games as well. Just a lot of just community-based stuff, that you have access on here that is way ahead anything on consoles right now. So it's awesome, you know, that you have that, pretty much you have that full experience of that on the Steam Deck here, as well as, you know, all your friends that you've like had on PC, like all the same features you could do with that, you can do it on here as well. SteamOS, it does have a feature in it to where like you can close out of the main like library menu and you can go into a desktop environment. Admittedly, I haven't played much with this at all, but for what I have tested though, as they, you know, it's a desktop-based environment, and you can use it very similar to like Windows, but you know, keep in mind it's still a Linux-based operating system. But the way that they set it up, they've really made it feel very similar to Windows, though, with like its start menu and some apps for the way that they function. You know, they did pick a distro that really makes it feel very similar to a Windows-based environment, though, thankfully. Though, admittedly, a big problem that I have with the desktop right now, it's really not that usable if you're just using the deck as it is by itself here. Meaning, like, sometimes the trackpads, they would work and sometimes they wouldn't for some reason. Using just like the actual like buttons and analog sticks, like it wasn't that usable at all. But because of course, you know, a desktop environment controls best with, you know, a mouse and keyboard. But thankfully, the deck does support docks with the USB Type-C port up here. Meaning you can connect like a hub to this that comes out to like USBs and an HDMI port and Ethernet, and with that you can connect like a mouse and keyboard straight into that, and you will have like a very similar PC experience with a mouse and keyboard using the deck's custom desktop interface there. So you do have that option, and Valve is making a dock themselves that will have like plenty of options to put on there, like multiple USBs and like HDMI port and display ports as well, so you can connect monitors to it, an Ethernet port as well. So they haven't, you know, released that yet, but in the near future that will become available pretty soon. So now I want to talk about some problems that I have on the system that haven't gone much into detail yet. So to start out with things with the hardware. The trackpads, they do work pretty well, but honestly, I feel like they're too small to really feel like you're getting a lot of coverage for moving the cursor around, honestly. And plus, playing certain games, whether it be like first-person shooters or say like a strategy game like Civ, or even like City Skylines for management games, I feel like it doesn't feel quite right playing it with this. If I'm totally honest with you, that I'd rather just, you know, use like the analog sticks. Though personally, that's just me. Though you may be different though. If like these trackpads work pretty well for you, like because personally, I think like the Steam controller's trackpads worked a lot better compared to these ones on here. And another thing too. Now this depends on the games that you're playing, but the D-pad, it's really good for navigating like SteamOS and menus and whatnot. And for like some indie games, like this works pretty well overall. Though when it comes to games that you would need to use the D-pad heavily, let's say like fighting games, for example, I feel like there's not enough, say like grip to the D-pad here, that it feels like my thumb, as I'm like moving across it often, it feels like it just slips often, if I'm honest. Like I don't have like a firm enough grip on it to where like I'm putting in the inputs that I want to on this. But that's the only problem I would have with it, though, is just when I'm playing like fighting games with this thing, because everything else I played with it where it doesn't demand a lot of, you know, going around different inputs on the D-pad, there totally works fine, though. If Valve was to do a revision of this, I hope they would have like some type of engravings here, or just make this in a certain material to where it's not so easy to slip your thumb off it, for example. Another thing, the back buttons here, it takes some time to get used to, but the way that you would press them, it's not like you would pull them towards outside the deck. You really have to like push like your fingers like inward towards it, though. it feels really strange when you're first like using this thing, but after a while you'll get used to it though. And really the reason why it's set up like that is so that way you don't accidentally press them as you're playing games on it, of course, because like regardless of how you hold this thing, your pinky finger and ring finger, they're always going to be like resting on these buttons though, with how it's designed though. But after you get used to the control scheme for the way it is, like you'll get very used to like doing your inputs on those back buttons though. So one last thing before we wrap this video up for my overall thoughts on this, I want to explain like why I think that the 64 gigabyte model is really worth getting to the other models for certain people. So I'll explain why. So the deck, you can take like the back plate off of it, and Valve themselves even showed you how to do that. Of course, they say like you should only be a skilled person for taking electronics apart to do something like that. But if you're someone like me, where you know I work as an IT technician, I know how to take apart computers and everything. So you can take this out, and the system, it uses like an M2 slot for its storage option. No matter which model of the system that you get, it uses a 2230 sized SSD drive. But with the 64 gig model, it uses eMMC storage for it. That is the older type of storage options, like before like NVMe SSDs were created. So, and you'll know of what it looks like because you'll see in like the golden pins, it has like two little notches on the side of it, compared to an NVMe drive, it has like a single notch on it. But with the 64 gig model, you know, you can open it up, take that out, and put in like a similar size to like 512 gigabyte drive in that, and you can reinstall SteamOS on this thing here. Valve has released tools to allow you to like reinstall the OS, make your own, get like an image of the operating system and put it on a flash drive and just install it back onto the system here. So, you know, you're someone like me, you want to like, you know, save money on this system, but you don't want to miss out on better storage with the other options. Like, I recommend you get the 64 gig model. Go ahead and buy yourself like a $50 to $70 512 gigabyte NVMe 2230 sized SSD, then put it in the system, reinstall SteamOS, and before you know it, you save like like $200 right there, and you have like, you know, the biggest storage option there. In fact, you can go up to a 1 terabyte in this thing if you want to, if you can, you know, get drives like that. Though of course, if you do need more storage on this thing, you don't want to do that method as I suggested there. The deck does come, you know, with a micro SD card slot on the bottom right here, so you can put in like whatever size micro SD card you want in there, and that'll add more storage to it. Just make sure you don't use a card that you're already using and has like data on there already, because you do have to like format the micro SD card in here when you first put it in so you can use it. So make sure like anything that you have on the micro SD card, if it's not a new one that you bought for this thing, make sure any data that you have on there is taken off it, because, you know, when you format it, that data is gone forever. So, closing thoughts. What are my overall thoughts on this thing here? I think this thing, it is like amazing. This is like such a revolutionary device for the PC gaming landscape that this really appeals to like different types of people. One is power users like myself, where like we have, you know, a beast gaming PC that we've already have like a vast amount of games in our Steam library. Well, you buy a Steam Deck, you have a portable system with pretty beefy hardware inside of it, and you have access to all of your games. Like, you know, in my case, I have more than 1,000 games on my Steam account. And like the majority of that, I can already play on this thing as soon as I get the system. In terms of people that, so like you're not like me, you've never been into PC gaming, you've only played on consoles, you know, this would probably be your first ever taste into PC gaming. But a thing that always made you not want to get into it before something like this is you didn't want to deal with the pains of a computer. Because, you know, there are a lot of potential issues that can come up with the computer and all that if you don't know what you're doing with it. So that alone makes something like this Steam Deck open up such a big new demographic for PC gaming, to where for people that don't want to deal with a big negative aspect that can come up with PC gaming, this thing totally negates that whole thing, where like you would need to know stuff about computer hardware and make sure like stuff is compatible with it, and potential like blue screens that would happen with it, that you have no idea what's going on, that you're potentially paying like a lot of money to take your computer to a repair shop so that way you can get it working again. Well, this negates all of that, and you have all of the positive aspects that comes with PC gaming that consoles like are far from ever having. With that demographic alone, that really can replace like a large chunk of people who use gaming laptops. You know, for people, you know, when they would get like gaming laptops, you know, they didn't want to deal with headaches for stuff that would come with computers, because when you buy a laptop, you know, the thing will just work out of the box, of course. Though maybe once in a while, you know, a problem will come up with the computer, like every once in a while, of course, but the Steam Deck will offer those people who hoped that they would never have to deal with that, but still wanted to, you know, get a gaming laptop to have everything that will just work. Well, the Steam Deck is a perfect option for people like that, thankfully. Another potential demographic that this may have, though, is people who would want like a very portable based computer, but they can take it to like many different places that they would like do work at, but they can have, say, like a dock with this thing and hook it up to like for like their different locations to do like editing work on that, because they, for example, they would have to like move to many different locations and whatnot. Well, with a dock, you know, you can instantly plug this in and have access to a whole like workstation and all that. Like the deck for something like this is a good fit for that. And if you're also a person that you would travel a lot, because clearly you are going to different locations, well, you have like a beast of a gaming device right here to play like many different games on it, of course. One thing to note, though, that definitely comes up a lot about the Steam Deck is this a Switch replacement? Totally understandable why people would think that. Yes and no. For me, I fall in that yes category. For me, this thing replaces my Nintendo Switch, with the exception of Nintendo's exclusive first-party games, because obviously those are only going to be on the Switch, of course. What was the one thing, you know, that everyone was disappointed with when the Switch OLED was announced? It was not the true Switch Pro that everybody hoped the Switch would be. More beefy hardware that would make third-party games like run better on this, and hopefully that we would not have to be hindered by cloud versions of certain games. The Steam Deck is a perfect replacement for people like me in that regard, because I knew a lot of people that their main platform would be PC gaming, but they also had like a Switch for Nintendo's first-party titles, and if they wanted to play like the same games that they had on PC on the go, they would get a Switch for that as well. Well, thankfully, the deck, because it has your entire Steam library on it, that the same games you already played on your PC that you would play on the Switch on the go, well, you can just have the Steam Deck and you have access to all of those games already that you don't have to rebuy on the Switch. That is a major, major selling factor for people like me, that I no longer have to carry my Switch around. I can just use this, get a much better gaming experience on it because of the more powerful hardware inside this thing, plus a lot of customization with all of these controls here, and plus no cloud versions of any games at all. That is a huge win in my book. And also, emulation is great on this thing. I'll link to some channel that does emulation videos on the deck here, because from what, you know, the videos I watched on this thing is possibly the ultimate emulation device for a portable based system. That is an awesome, awesome win right there. So another thing, like the deck compared to the Switch, this has a huge library of games you can possibly play on this thing. Yes, certain ones may have compatibility issues and all that, but it still has like a huge catalog of PC games throughout history, plus emulation, as I discussed. Now, for the people that would say, like, no, this is not a replacement Switch for them, is people that, you know, again, they don't want to deal with potential issues of PC gaming and all that, which I totally understand why. Because for some people, you know, they would want to buy a gaming device, and no matter what game they buy, it'll just work on it. The Switch will have that that benefit towards it, because the Steam Deck, as great as Valve is doing a great job of making like everything compatible with it, and that more and more stuff gets compatible with it over time, that still doesn't mean that you can buy everything on this thing right now, at least, and have it just work completely and perfectly. You know, the Switch still has that advantage though, so if you want to, you know, buy something that no matter what it just works, then the Switch is the answer to that for you, of course. Plus, you know, Nintendo's first party exclusive games, you know, you can only get them on that system, of course, so there's that as well too. But overall, though, that is my general thoughts on the system here. I'm really happy I managed to get one within its, you know, its first month launch here, because, you know, it's really difficult to get these things, of course. If you guys, you know, still have a reservation down for it, that you potentially will be getting it within, whether it be the next few days, months, weeks, what have you. I hope this was informative for you, to let you know if you're going to, you know, pay the money when you do get that email to have this thing shipped to you and all that. Though, of course, if you haven't put down a reservation yet, you keep in mind you're going to be waiting a long time to get one. There have been reports that if you try to put down a reservation now, no matter which model of this system that you get, you possibly might be waiting until October 2022 to eventually get that email. So, yeah, keep that in mind if you're going into that, because, you know, just the demand of this thing, and we're still in the, you know, that the chip shortage and whatnot. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. Unless if you're an impatient person, you know, you can go on eBay and pay like $2,000 possibly to get one, of course, which you shouldn't do, obviously, but you know, that's up to you to decide. If you like, you can't wait any longer, then, you know, you only have that option, of course. But I would suggest to just reconsider, just have some patience. And plus, you know, so like you do, you know, get yours in like October. By that time, you know, way more stuff is going to be compatible with this thing. More stuff will be fixed with like the UI, as I mentioned, of course. But regardless, though, of whenever you do get this thing, I guarantee you'll have an amazing experience with it. I'm really glad that I had a chance to play with this thing, though. That overall, it's been a great experience with it. Minus, you know, a few hiccups, but honestly, there's not much problems with this thing that I've had, though. But of course, you know, this is coming from someone who's a power user. If you're someone, you know, you're not into tech and all that, there might, you know, your look on this may be different, though. And I hope, you know, I was informative to let you know if this would be, say, like your first venture into PC gaming, which, trust me, there's so much benefits to PC gaming that this is such an amazing first entry into PC gaming, that I hope, you know, with the success of this device, that many more companies, they make their own version of a Steam Deck. We've already had that, though, you know, with the Aya Neo and all that, but, you know, that thing is like $1,000+ and all that, and while this is at least $400. Keep that in mind, you know, this is $50 more than the Switch OLED, and the processing power of this thing is like 10 times more than that of the Switch. Plus, you can do so many different things with this device, because, again, at the end of the day, it's a PC. You can do what you want with this thing. Of course, it's not illegal, of course. But yeah, that's the Steam Deck, guys. I hope this was informative for you. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I do appreciate it if you would share this with someone. If, you know, people are having any thoughts of getting a Steam Deck, I hope, you know, you can share this, and hopefully this will help them decide if they're going to get one or not and all that. So do appreciate if you would rate this video, comment below of your thoughts on the Steam Deck, and if you already played with one, what are your thoughts on it? Is it everything you wanted it to be? What are some things you would fix with it? And let me know if, you know, you already have a reservation down, or if you decide, you know, if you're going to get this thing or not, or whether if you're a PC gamer, or, you know, if you've always been a console gamer, of what your viewpoint of this thing is. I'm really interested to see, like, what different people's perspectives is on this. So with that said, do subscribe for more content like this in the future. Until then, I'll see you next time.